If you've ever played Dark Souls, you'll instantly feel right at home with Ashen. It's not exactly a carbon copy, but instead uses the Souls template as a starting point, with a huge emphasis upon stamina-based combat, renewable healing items, a bonfire-like saving system, and of course the loss of acquired souls upon your death. But thanks to its rather unique art direction, as well as its take on cooperative play, it soon begins to distance itself from the series that inspired it. The narrative all revolves around returning light to a dark and desolate land. You won't be adventuring alone though, as many AI-controlled allies join you in your journey. You begin with a sort of hub base for all of your activities. This hub expands throughout the duration of the game, depending on how many NPCs you interact with during your travels, and eventually blossoms into a tight-knit community full of shopkeepers and like-minded adventurers who can all join you on the hunt. It's a pretty deep system as well, as each NPC can be loaded out according to your specifications, which really comes in handy when encountering some of the more daunting enemies that await you outside. Let's get into combat. Although there are quite a few upgrades and variations for each weapon, the overall choice is fairly limited to be honest, and instead just focuses upon melee. There are no bows or swords, with the only ranged weapon being that of a spear. At first this might seem a bit disappointing, but with each weapon having the same basic moveset, it helps the overall combat feel simplified and accessible. But it's not going to be easy. Just like Dark Souls, Ashen is really going to test your patience, with timing, stamina, dodging and pattern memorization playing a huge role in mastering the overall system. Ashen can proudly stand tall, shoulder to shoulder with its contemporaries. At first glance, it's easy to just dismiss Urban Trial Tricky as another clone of Ubisoft's popular Trial series. If you dig deeper though, it soon becomes apparent that it possesses enough personality and depth to stand out against the games that have clearly inspired it. The first few levels act as a basic tutorial, where you're given the time to get used to the specific control setup and mechanics without having to worry about high scores or being as quick as you can. Before you know it, you're zooming through a range of hazard-filled tracks whilst pulling off some crazy tricks, racking up as many points as you can, and of course trying not to crash. If you're at all familiar with the likes of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, you'll have a good idea of what Urban Trial is trying to do. Each of the levels are broken up into three main objectives. Firstly, you have timed, then competition and tricks. Timed is the one you'll be encountering the most often, with each run only lasting around 30 seconds. Tricks and competition on the other hand provide much more freedom and ask you to perform your own combination of tricks in order to achieve the score required. A total of 5 stars can be earned on each level, as well as a cash prize for specific challenges. These proceeds can then be spent on one of the central aspects of the game, that being customization. There's a generous amount of new bikes, riders, costumes and exhaust effects to unlock, but most importantly, there's a ton of new stunts you can unlock as well, allowing you to personalize your runs by designating your favorite and most implausible tricks to the various button presses available. This aspect alone will keep you going for hours on end and provides a healthy amount of replay value. The best thing about it, Urban Trial Tricky isn't going to break the bank and is fairly cheap to pick up. With the wealth of content and rewarding gameplay it offers, coupled with this cheap price, I can highly recommend you pick it up and give it a go. Rune Factory 4 originally made its first appearance on the 3DS way back in 2012. With several successful releases on the DS and even a couple of Wii installments, Rune Factory's debut on the 3DS felt like a fresh start and the beginning of a wave of new games. Thankfully, with the Switch, not only is the 5th game in development, but we also got an upgraded version of 4 titled Special that gave us a bump in resolution, new assets and content that make it the best way to experience the 3DS classic before the new game arrives. The player can choose from 2 separate characters who start out the adventure on an airship headed to a town known as Selphia. They are soon attacked by a mysterious group which results in the ship crash landing, and in true RPG fashion, you just happen to lose your memory when you wake up. Overall, the narrative is pretty good, but what makes Rune Factory is its stellar gameplay. You'll find yourself clearing out your fields, chopping up timber, breaking up stones, planting seeds, and watering them until they're ready to harvest. It takes a lot of inspiration from harvesting harvest moon, with each of the crops you can grow having their own monetary value. But it's not just a gardening simulator. As you're running around Salthea, events will happen that will prompt you to venture outside of the town, where various monsters and dungeons await. You can select from a variety of spells, skills, and weapons to use in battle against these threats, and combat has a surprising amount of depth thanks to all of them. Alternatively, you could also try and tame a monster, which can then follow you into battle or even help you out at the farm. Rune Factory 4 Special is one hell of a game. It's near endless with the amount of content on offer and would make a welcome addition to any Switch owner's library. Star Ocean First Departure R is essentially a remaster of the PSP remake, which was itself a reimagining of the very first title in the series. It sees you playing the part of a young man named Roddick, who belongs to the local village's defense force. After a mysterious illness that turns its victims into stone starts appearing in the village, he sets out with a band of like-minded heroes to ultimately find a cure. If you're at all fond of RPGs, the gameplay will feel instantly familiar. It sees you visiting towns and dungeons scattered across an overworld map. Each encounter plays out in real time, and your party consists of up to 4 characters, one of which you directly control, and the rest being handed off to the AI. You can move around the field to avoid enemy attacks. You also have special attacks that have a range of uses, such as crowd control and attacking from a distance, although the best strategy is simply to rapidly hit your opponent so they never get a chance to fight back. As you fight and gain experience, like in almost any JRPG out there, you gain extra points to spend on skills. These skills are used to determine how good that character is at things like item creation or extra combat effects and abilities. This gives the player some feeling of control over how the characters develop and allows you to cater each to your specific style of play. While the game isn't very long for a single playthrough, the replayability of the game is improved by the various party members you can acquire. You can't find them all in a single playthrough, so you might want to play again to try each and every one of them out. If you're looking for a solid RPG on the Switch and have exhausted the usual suspects, Star Ocean First Departure R will not disappoint. Gato Roboto is a game that wears its inspiration on its sleeves, the biggest one being Nintendo's Metroid series. The soundtrack, enemies, map, and even the visuals of the world are all drawn from the classic series. The twist though is how you take up the fight as Kiki, a cute cat who has a fondness for mech suits. The action picks up with Kiki responding to a mysterious distress signal from an alien planet. Upon their arrival, they crash land, resulting in Kiki having to scour the planet for supplies and for a way to escape its clutches. Now gameplay is pretty straightforward. You can jump, shoot, and explore to your heart's content, but with Kiki being a cat, a few unique skills help it stand out against Metroid, the main one being the ability to run up walls. Naturally, the planet is infested with enemies, and your only option is to take them on with a trusty blaster, but scattered throughout the environment are an assortment of upgrades such as rockets and powerful mech suits that give you a range of options when it comes to dealing with each and every obstacle you'll come up against. Now boss battles are a real highlight, with each one serving as a thrilling test of platforming and shooting skill. They are quite tough as well, but not to the point of sheer frustration, which helps the game flow at an even pace. If I had only one complaint, is that it just feels all too familiar. Gato Roboto borrows from the Metroid formula well, but falls short due to not offering much innovation of its own. If you're a fan of Metroid, this one will be right up your street. Just remember going in that it'll feel like a game that you've already played. It's been 2 decades since we've seen another release in the Wave Race series. Nintendo have seemed to all but abandon the franchise, but thankfully there's others out there who are willing to pick up the mantle, and Vector Unit absolutely delivered with their take on the popular water sport. Now there's several modes to get stuck into, with the main being the fairly deep career mode that will last you at least 10 hours if you're aiming for 3 stars on each level. For every race you beat, you'll gain a specific amount of experience points and prize money depending on your performance. As you increase in level, you slowly gain access to more and more upgrades for your jet, such as acceleration, speed, handling and boost, that all come into play out on the water in a noticeable way. Now it's not only what position you finish in that determines how much XP or money you earn. Riptide GP possesses a pretty extensive trick and skill system as well, with many of them that can be unlocked as you level up, such as the duration of your boost, an increase in drafting to easily close in on your rivals. And to top all of this off, there's several hydrojets and characters which you can earn after completing specific challenges. Just as varied and exciting as the items you can unlock are the courses themselves you'll be racing on. From futuristic cities to storm-ridden landscapes, each of them are filled with interactive objects such as ramps that enable the player to perform stunts, as well as dynamic water that reacts to the environment as well as your actions. Unfortunately, there's no online option, but the inclusion of couch co-op is a welcome addition and adds a serious amount of longevity to the game. If you're an old-school wave race fan, itching for a new release, I'm sure Riptide GP will provide a scratch. Crosscode is simply a pixel art masterpiece. The narrative sees mankind having mastered virtual reality, and video games are fully interactive experiences that are lifelike in almost every way. But they've taken it a step further by mixing augmented reality with actual reality. Crossworlds is the biggest and most popular MMO in the game world, with the people on Earth controlling their characters in the form of avatars. You play as a young girl named Leah, who is thrown into the MMO against her will. Not only does Leah have amnesia, but she is also mute, with no understanding of who she is, how she got there, or what she is supposed to do. Without getting into spoilers, there are also some very crazy aspects that are revealed later in the game that will make you really wonder about our own future. Some real Black Mirror kind of stuff that will blur the lines of what makes life, well, life. Now, Leah is a spheromancer, which means she can hurl balls of energy at enemies as her primary attack. This is basically a rapid-fired range attack that you'll be using very often. It's fast like a machine gun, has infinite ammo, and can even ricochet off walls. Melee builds are equally viable, as most enemies aren't afraid to get close to you. Mixing up melee attacks with ranged is what the game is all about. You'll eventually unlock elemental abilities that'll change how your attacks function as well. The skill tree is already pretty big, and gets even bigger as you level up. You can allocate points to certain skills to significantly improve your combos, damage output, defense, health regeneration, or speed. Customization is a huge part of the game. If you never got around to it, Crosscode seriously needs your attention. It's a game that I highly recommend. The Fatal Fury games have long been one of my favourite fighting series, but one entry which is arguably the best often gets overlooked. It is hands down one of SNK's best 2D fighters, which brings together an impressive roster of characters and some of the tightest gameplay the franchise has to offer. As you would expect, each fighter possesses a range of basic attacks that they all share, but what makes them stand out are their individual special moves. To be honest, there aren't really a lot of moves in the game. At most there's 6 to 7 for each. Mechanically is where Mark of the Wolves excels though. First is the tactical defensive positioning gauge, which allows you to highlight a certain part of your health bar in which you may perform a powerful TOP move, slowly regain health, and dish out additional damage. The placement of the TOP area is entirely up to the player, and you can choose to have it at any 3 sizes. The smaller an area it highlights, the greater amount of damage you can do, and the quicker you regain health. Then there's the Just Defend system, where if you block exactly at the last moment, you will gain a blue aura around you. During this phase, you will gain back a small amount of health, and you'll be able to immediately counter-attack with no recovery time in between. Finally, the break feature is probably what manages to give the game so much depth. Basically, you can break certain moves and throw in another one or any of your powers. The game is quite balanced, with no character being too much for the rest of the cast, and although the bosses are selectable, they are toned down when you use them. If you're looking for a fighter to get into on the Switch, Mark of the Wolves is a solid option. Every now and then, a game comes along which seems to defy convention, and quite often suffers because of it. Genesis Noir is one of those games, but at the same time the most distinctive and downright innovative experience I've played. It's literally like nothing that has come before it, and manages to carve out its own identity with its incredible art direction as well as its premise that spans the entire cosmos. At the centre of the game is a tale about loss, and the lengths people will go in order to avoid it. You take on the role of No Man, a simple watchmaker in his struggle to save his girlfriend from the Golden Boy, a scorned ex-lover. Upon receiving a call with her crying for help, he rushes to her apartment just in time to see her being shot by the Golden Boy, gets in the way, and after touching the bullet, he finds he can now rewind time. It's all pretty bizarre at face value, but the more you uncover and learn about the world, the story soon unravels and becomes one of the best parts of Genesis Noir. Now, from a gameplay perspective, it's essentially a point-and-click adventure that's presented through a series of vignettes elements that all revolve around no man stopping the bullet from reaching its target. There's many tasks you'll come across, but the most prominent is that of collecting materials in order to create a black hole. These materials are scattered throughout each environment and play a key role not only in the gameplay but the overall narrative as well. Unfortunately, it's not all sunshine and lollipops. Genesis Noir suffers from a few technical hiccups that may have the potential to throw some players off. For starters, the control setup can be a bit awkward and feels much more at home on the PC rather than the Joy-Cons or Pro Controller. Then there's the frame rate, which at times can literally chug along and potentially break the immersion that Genesis Noir relies so heavily upon. It's not a complete deal breaker, but just something to be aware of if you were thinking of picking it up. The Switch has been home to some solid exclusives over the years, but if there's one that deserves much more attention than it received, it has to be Astral Chain. Platinum Games are well known for their extravagance and special flavour of Japanese weirdness, without having to invest hours upon hours into a complex RPG. This is so true with Astral Chain, which takes place in a futuristic space colony, with the player taking on the mantle of one of two characters. They can both be fully customised to your liking, with the one you failed to choose becoming your support throughout the game. Now, the core gameplay is all about combat and puzzle solving. You have several weapons at your disposal, such as a laser pistol you start the game with, a light, swift baton, and a slow, heavy blade. But the most useful tool in combat is something known as your Legion. It's a sort of companion that fights alongside you and has its own HP. You'll also use the Astral Chain, a central mechanic to the combat that is used to tame the Legion in a variety of different ways, like stopping a charging enemy in its tracks, or even binding it by spinning the Legion around it and leaving it open for devastating attacks. Astral Chain does include some light RPG elements and allows you to upgrade several aspects of your Legion throughout the course of the game. In order to do so, you need to collect items from fallen enemies, which can teach new active and passive skills to the Legion. It's a great system, and with the several forms that the Legion offers, you'll never be at a loss as to what to do when it comes to taking on the hordes of enemies. Visually, Astral Chain is stunning on the Switch. The vibrant and dense world Platinum Games created looks beautiful in motion and is a real testament to the power of the Switch when put into the hands of the right developers. If you never got round to playing it, Astral Chain will not disappoint. Well, that does it for today's video. Don't forget to hit subscribe and tickle that bell. You can follow me on all of the socials to stay up to date on future videos, as well as to take part in giveaways. You can also join our growing community on Discord and meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to our Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Nano, Steve, Richard and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining our Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find the links in the description. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you next time.